My presentation is about isolated individuals, elderly living alone. Elderly living alone are a population caught between still living in their own home and at the same time not being able to care for themselves as independently as they have previously in life. Additional factors might be their spouse or friends have passed away, they don't really know any of their neighbors, or they may be unable to continue driving due to declining sight and/or health problems. They might not have any support because their family members may live out of state, or they are ignored by their family, or they may have disowned their family members. Whatever the reason, there are many elderly that need additional help in their everyday lives, and they struggle to accomplish daily activities and things we take for granted. The size of the elderly population, age 65 plus, locally and statewide, is relatively comparable. There is a much more noticeable difference in the size of the elderly population, age 65 plus, nationally and internationally. The difference lies in the quality and access to care nationally versus internationally. Food, shelter, safety, and basic needs of the elderly population are better met in the U.S. than in countries that are poverty-stricken and plagued with third world conditions. The main determinants that affect the health of the elderly population are mainly poor economic and social conditions. The elderly need to have the resources to meet their daily needs, such as safe housing and access to food for good nutrition. Another major factor is access to quality health care, health education, and literacy. Many elderly lack adequate insurance coverage and can't afford the high cost of health services. Also, many elderly have limited transportation options. A large amount of the elderly population no longer drive because of poor eyesight and failing health conditions. They may have little or no family, friends, and neighbors to help with transportation and other supportive services. Additional contributing factors that affect health include their economic level growing up, education level, which has affected their career, job, and economic status. Also the neighborhood where they live, their lifestyle, and chance for retirement planning and planning for the future. Gender, age, religious orientation, race, ethnicity, and culture are all factors that contribute their part to determine the overall and future health and well-being of each of us as individuals. The baby boomer generation, born between 1946 and 1964, is the largest generation in American history. Because of this, there will be a senior boom in the population of people 65 to 85 between the year 2011 to 2030. Women outnumber men because they have a higher rate of life expectancy. In Utah, rural communities have the largest percentage of seniors. This causes concerns for access to transportation, health services, and other services that affect seniors to live independently. The growth of the elderly population will also affect the overall community due to the tax base and funding for public services. Baby boomers are expected to live longer than previous generations, so this means they will require benefits and services over a longer lifespan. There are two root causes for the elderly population. The first is financial, which starts with their background, then education, income level, and economic stability, which affects housing and their everyday life. Many seniors were unable to or did not plan for retirement. The elderly rely on four main sources of income: personal savings and earnings, pensions, and Social Security. Social Security alone is not enough to maintain an adequate standard of living. There is not enough money from their other sources of income, then the elderly struggle to make ends meet. Second, many elderly are plagued with multiple health problems that affect their lives in many ways. The main causes are increasing health costs and poor access to health services. These factors have major effects on the elderly and their overall health and the outcomes related to their multiple health problems and concerns. The hierarchy of needs vary for each individual and each population group. For the elderly, the hope is that their need for minimal to adequate health, safe housing, food, and utilities is met. It is more likely their unmet needs include self-esteem, friendship, and a support system. Lack of these greatly affect their coping skills and daily life skills. The functional level of the majority of the elderly is intertwined with their health. If their health is addressed and maintained, it is much more likely they will be more active and functional in their everyday lives and feel a sense of overall well-being and happiness. Not all needs will be met, but more needs that are met lend to a more balanced and fulfilling life. The most common infections the elderly population is at risk for are 1, bacterial pneumonia. Because of health conditions such as diabetes and heart disease, this increases their susceptibility to several common infections. 2nd, influenza, mostly because the elderly have weakened immune systems and influenza is easily transmitted. Often influenza can lead to pneumonia and other life-threatening complications. 3, skin infections, cellulitis, pressure ulcers, foot infections, primarily due to diabetes, MRSA, and viral infections such as shingles. Proper hand washing and vaccines are the best preventions for these. The most common non-communicable diseases in the elderly population are heart disease, stroke, lung disease, diabetes, and cancer. Most of these are usually chronic conditions that usually progress slowly and have a long duration. Many of the non-communicable diseases that affect the elderly and the population as a whole are affected by economics, physical inactivity, diet, and use of tobacco and alcohol. Lifestyle and the environment they live in contributes to the nutrition, health, and life expectancy of the elderly population. Health equals independence. Good nutrition means eating healthy and eating a well-balanced diet that helps our bodies function optimally. Proper nutrition affects health conditions and the body's ability to physically and mentally maintain balance and emotionally. Loss of smell and appetite, poor vision, poor oral health, and the need for dentures can affect the elderly population by the kinds and types of foods and nutrition they take in. Medications also affect the elderly's appetite and food intake. Transportation can affect getting to the store to buy the adequate and proper foods, and mobility issues can prevent this population by having a difficult time getting around and difficulty standing for long periods of time to prepare and cook food. A good support system of family, friends, neighbors, and healthcare providers allows the elderly help with their day-to-day living activities, a means for social interaction, and most important, provides them with a sense of love and belonging and a reason to continue living, not just surviving. The elderly are a population group that are especially susceptible for risk to harm because of their trusting nature and need to rely on others for care and assistance. There are many forms of elder abuse, including physical abuse, sexual abuse, emotional and psychological abuse, neglect, and financial abuse and exploitation. The senior adult may also be at a greater risk for harm to themselves and others due to a history of abuse as a child or adult, their social history of alcohol and drug use and abuse, or effects and interactions of their prescription medications. Their mental health history and their inadequate coping skills also lend to this. The elderly may also exhibit disruptive behavior such as outbursts, aggression, and tantrums that may be harmful to themselves or others that are precipitated by dementia or Alzheimer's disease.